Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Deep Dive, the official podcast of Nightdive Studios. We're so happy you've joined us for the start of what hopefully will be a long-running series, and to kick things off, let's get to know the team. For those that may not know me, I'm your host, Dimitris, also known as MVG on YouTube. Also, full disclaimer, I previously worked at Nightdive from 2020 to 2022, but moved on to the Carbon Engine team over at Limited Run. We are all family here, and I was honored to be asked by Nightdive if I could host the podcast, and of course I said yes. My favorite Nightdive game changes all the time, but I have to say recently the sublime Dark Forces Remastered ticks all the boxes for me. It's a remaster done right, as they say.
Hello, my name is Morgan. I'm the comms manager at Nightdive, and my favorite Nightdive game is System Shock.
Hey everyone, my name is Locke Vincent, and I'm a video producer here at Nightdive Studios. You know, my favorite Nightdive game is really difficult to choose because, on one hand, I love all of the full-motion video adventure games, Tex Murphy, Seventh Guest, 11 Hour, even Harvester. And then, of course, all of the stuff on the Kex engine with Power Slave, Blood, System Shock. Those are all great, but something that I have a soft spot for is horror games, and Shadow Man is something that I just have loved more and more as I play it. And it's got a great vibe. It's got those dark religious horror themes. The soundtrack and sound design is great. And it's just it's a really cool game that you don't see a lot of. So I'm going to go with Shadow Man as my favorite Nightdive Studios game.
In addition to our hosts, this episode will feature several members of the Nightdive development team as they talk about their work on a very special up-and-coming project here at Nightdive. And speaking of special projects, in celebration of the recent release of System Shock on Xbox and PlayStation, we're giving 5 listeners who stick with us until the end a chance to win a code for System Shock on their platform of choice simply by commenting an answer to a question prompt that will pop up later in the show. Now, with that all out of the way, let's deep dive right into our first segment. Starting with the recent milestones for the Nightdive crew, on May 16 was the release of PO Definitive Edition, a game that was announced as a reverse April Fool's joke back on April the 1st, and on May 21st released System Shock for Xbox and PlayStation consoles, and both of these titles are very unique in different ways. Now, I'm personally really happy to see System Shock on consoles as a big fan of preservation and physical media. The entire game is on disc, and not only this, System Shock has been always a game that's been tied to mouse and keyboard control, so heavily binded to mouse and keyboard. So having it running on consoles at good performance and with good controller support is excellent. And then there's PO Definitive Edition. Now, this is a game I did know about back in the days of the 3DO, but I had never played it before. So I did take it for a spin, the Definitive Edition, earlier this week, and I love it. It's a weird oddball FPS game from the 90s, and it's something that I can easily fall in love with. It has some of the most insane weapons in the game that I've seen, and things just seem to get crazier as you play. It's definitely an awesome time for old boomers like me. Now, elsewhere in the news, Atari keeps on growing with its latest acquisition of Intellivision. Now, this is something I personally never thought I would see in my lifetime. And according to Atari chairman and CEO Wade Rosen, he said this was a very rare opportunity to unite former competitors and bring together fans of Atari, Intellivision, and the golden age of gaming. And look, I get it. These opportunities don't come up very often. And it's amazing how large and yet how small the industry can feel. Atari will secure branding and rights to over 200 Intellivision titles, and that is pretty cool. Now, full disclaimer, I don't know anything if there is anything actually going on here, but personally, as someone that was not invested in Intellivision growing up, I was not a system that I had back in the day when I was growing up. I had a Commodore 64 in the household, so Intellivision is a system that I'm obviously very familiar with, but I have really no nostalgia for, and really not much knowledge about when it comes to the games. I'd love to see that Digital Eclipse Goldmaster series with the Atari 50 style presentation. I think that would really be a big treat for the fans. Also in the news, Xbox announced that Call of Duty Black Ops 6 would be hitting day one on Game Pass. Now, in hindsight, this makes total sense, but there have been many questions about Game Pass, its long-term profitability, and its growth. This is definitely a good move and a necessary move from Microsoft to boost Game Pass and console sales. Now, Microsoft in the past has faced tough questions about the potential cannibalization effect of what Game Pass can do, especially on smaller games or AA games that launch on the service day one. Now, I do think that these big games like Call of Duty really is the bread and butter and what will really help with sustainability on Game Pass. But as with everything that's been going on this year, we have to take a wait and see approach. Now, personally, I'm not someone that is subscribed to Game Pass, but I am a big fan of Call of Duty, and I will say it's a guilty pleasure game of mine where I simply buy it every single year. I race through the campaign very quickly, beat it, and then move on to the multiplayer. And if you look at my Xbox stats, I have hundreds of hours in Warzone. So I'm a big fan of the Call of Duty series. Now look, Call of Duty does get criticized a lot, but millions of players keep coming back every single year. And good luck to Microsoft and Xbox with this Game Pass launch this year. We'll definitely keep a close eye on how things go.
Another news piece that I found really interesting recently was one about a study from Quantic Foundry, which kind of harvested 9 years of data from their gamer motivation profile tool, which kind of tracks different categories, things like competition, challenge, story, design, strategy. And what's motivated gamers over the years has been pretty consistent according to this, except for strategy, which is seeing quite a steep decline consistently. According to Quantic Foundry, like across the 1.7 million surveys that it sent out, about 2/3 of strategy fans are losing interest in this element of games. According to Quantic Foundry, 67% of gamers care less about strategic thinking and planning when playing games than the average gamer back in June of 2015, which doesn't seem like that long ago, and then you think about it and it is. But it's interesting to think about. I would honestly love to see more information about the study itself, like what kind of surveys within those 1.7 million surveys in terms of like demographics, preferences in general. Like, I think it can be very subjective. We're taking things into account, like the games industry has grown quite a lot since 2015 as a whole. It includes a lot more range of players, I feel like, more casual players, gamers of younger ages. And then in general, though, I feel like there's always going to be an audience for strategy games, especially when fans of those games are often really, really passionate about them and put like hundreds, if not thousands of hours into them in some cases. So yeah, I mean, what's not to love about strategy games? Games like XCOM, Civilization, Stellaris. I think there will always be appeal there. And I'd like to see more from that study. I would like to see how that trends, especially moving forward in the future.
Now, from my perspective, this isn't really a huge surprise. It's 2024 and we live in an age where content is consumed extremely fast. And this is not only in video games. We're talking about things like YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Twitter. Information is presented extremely fast, people consume it, and then they move on very quickly. And the same can be applied with video games. People want to play 10 minutes of a Fortnite game, or they want to play 10 minutes of Among Us or Fall Guys, but they're not really interested in sitting down and spending hours and hours of time on a real-time strategy game. Unfortunately, I would love to see this trend get reversed because I'm someone that does love strategy games. I'm a big Total Annihilation fan from back in the day, but it's very difficult for me to see any type of way that strategy games will be anything more than a niche product going forward. Of course, how could we talk about gaming news and IGN and not mention IGN Live, where we are sharing this exciting announcement that we're working on The Thing. What is The Thing all about? What other things can we share about it in addition to what we've shared at IGN Live? Well, let's directly hear from the development team themselves.
And Mark, why don't you introduce yourself for our audience?
Yeah, my name is Mark Atkinson, and I was the technical director at Computer Artworks here in London, UK, and we were the original developers of The Thing back in 2003.
2003, we are just over 20 years past. Why has The Thing come back? Why now?
I think it's a well-loved title. It remains like a cult movie that like everybody really likes. I see Reddit threads on why is nobody remaking this, and Nightdive have just got this amazing reputation for doing these remasters really well. So when they came along and said, "Hey, this is happening. We got the rights. I was fully up for it, and I've tried to help out as much as possible, and just kind of explain how things work in the engine and how things work in some of the gameplay, and help steer them. Questions like, did you do this for a good reason, or did you just run out of time? Or was it because you couldn't do it on the PS2? And I'm
Right.
able to, you know, steer these in the right direction. And on the tech side, they're also trying to glue together our pretty complex engine for the time
Yeah.
with their CAX engine for all the modern bells and whistles. And so, I've been helping out with that process as well where I can. So.
Coming back, 20 years later, what are some of the things you were excited about with working on this remaster?
I think, yeah, just to be able to bring it up to date. The artists are obviously doing an amazing job with updating all the assets and upresing all the. We had a lot of high-res original assets. We were quite careful to master everything much higher resolution than we actually needed in the game, and we managed to dig out a lot of that stuff from the archives, and some of it's been hand done, so just making it look modern.
How does your design process work when you kind of your those restraints are taken off with something like a remaster?
I mean, I think there's different aspects to it. On the engine side, obviously, we're not going to redo like the entire game.
Yeah.
It's not like a full remake,
Yeah.
and so taking the existing things and just making them shinier, adding shadow maps, adding specular maps. These are things that are nice quality of life improvements, and just, high resolution, all the tricks that we can do just purely on the engine side. So that's been good, and to the extent that we can, we've been going through like relighting the levels, and taking advantage of this stuff, and pulling out some of the cheesy vertex coloring tricks
Yeah.
that we did in the original. So the other part of it is on the gameplay side, which is, again, there's this kind of contention between where do you draw the line between a remaster or a remake,
Yeah.
and so we're gonna try and fix some quality of life issues which we weren't happy about but kind of run out of time on. There's still a question over, do we have a classic mode switch that
Right.
does it exactly the way it was for the hardcore fans? But I think there's a lot of stuff in how the weapon aiming works, how the reloading works. Uh, if you hold the grenade too long, it blows up in your hand, which I always hated.
Yeah.
There's a couple of areas where there's like really not enough ammo, and you get kind of stuck without ammo, and there's nothing you can do. So we get to also do a pass with just polishing up that kind of stuff as well, and making it. It's also a bit hard for modern
Yeah.
audiences as well.
It's
So we're
got
going to
some
put
it's got some
difficulty
friction to it.
levels.
Yeah, it's got some friction
Yeah,
to it.
there's a couple of bits that, I mean, that are really, you can really get your ass kicked, and that's not good. For if somebody really just wants to play through it. It was
Mhm.
normal back in the day that if you got a game that you'd only get halfway through it, get stuck, and you'd.
You'd have to
But
start
now
over. Yeah.
yeah, that it's not really acceptable now. So it's not like we're doing story mode. It's still
Yeah.
going to be tricky, but there's at least going to be some difficulties scaling available. To make it a little bit more accessible
Yeah.
to the modern taste as well. So,
Nice.
and plus, we're also doing things like back then we had, you only got a controller on a console, and you only got mouse and keyboard on a
Right.
PC, and now you have both on both. So now we have to support all these things as well, which then ties into how heavy you go in auto aiming, and so there's a lot of interrelated factors that we have to rebalance. But it's going to definitely play as well, and better than the original. It's going to look much nicer. Uh, so much polish is going in already. It's too early to show screenshots yet, but from the assets that I've seen, it looks great. So you're still kind of working in the dark a bit. You don't know what people are going to like or not like, and how much they're going to say, yeah, you fixed this. This is awesome, or you should have left it like I
Yeah.
remember it. So it'll be interesting to see how it's received, and hopefully positively, and everyone will will enjoy playing it. So
I really
yeah.
appreciate your time and your words of wisdom and expertise on this. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Okay, thank you.
A little while ago, we shared the news about our podcast on social media and asked everyone in the community to shout out some games they think deserve a remake or remaster. We got a lot of fantastic responses. Here are some of the most popular. So, I saw quite a lot of comments myself about Turok Evolution, and I think that that honestly makes sense considering, Nightdive has done 1, 2, and 3, and I just think it's a great game, so I would love that. Saw comments like that from like LukeMan3000 on Twitter, the Boat Rocker on Twitter, and then another one I saw on Twitter that I loved as well was System Shock 2 remake from SPS Aesthetics. I love the System Shock remake, obviously biased, but I would love to see the second game as well get a remake. That would be really, really cool. Some of the other ones that I saw pop up are things like Blood 2. Obviously, No One Lives Forever is a popular one. Dark Forces 2, which would be pretty cool since the first game just, our remaster just dropped. And then Thief. I like Thief as an idea. Deus Ex. And then just random, I think the space pinball game from the old school computers where like if you had no internet, all you had was space pinball. Yeah, so let's remake or remaster space pinball. That would be something. Before we wrap things up, what game would you guys like to see remade or remastered?
I think if there's one game that I want to see remastered by Nightdive, it has to be No One Lives Forever. I know it's the cliche, it's the game that we've talked about for years and years and years. I know Steven and Larry have been talking about Nolf pretty much since the very beginning, trying to get that game, trying to get the license for it, trying to get it remastered. But I still have hope that one day all the stars will align and we will finally see Kex Engine running No One Lives Forever on all platforms with consoles and PC at 4K, 120 FPS with all the bells and whistles from the Kex Engine. I know that this can happen, so I'm going to put it out there in the universe and hopefully it'll come true one day.
So the game that I would love Nightdive to get their hands on for a remake is the original Legacy of Kain, Blood Omen, that came to us from Silicon Knights. And you play as this vampire Kain on a revenge story. And it's got a great story. You don't have to touch that. Great bones there. And really what you could do is remake some of the systems and bring those up to modern day standards. Things like the combat, the environmental design, the open world, give it a little bit more life, maybe a little less linear. And I think you could do a lot there. It comes in with that gothic fantasy style. I really love the Souls series. So, freshen Legacy of Kain up to, something like Grim Dawn or Diablo 4 could look like. And yeah, it's a really, really special game. And I realized, Soul Reaver, the next in the series, is more aligned with what Nightdive does with the Kex engine. But I really have a soft spot for Legacy of Kain Blood Omen. So that's what I'd love to see them remake.
So for my pick, I chose Fear. I think that of all of the games that I've played over the years, it's stuck with me the most. I am still impressed with the enemy AI and how it interacts with you. I think that still holds up really well. Although visually, I think it could use a remaster at the very least. Although I would honestly love to see a Fear remake. Love the first two games. Was a little bit sad about the third game. But I think there's definitely a demand for the first game to come back. And I kind of like the idea because I've seen a lot of demand for No One Lives Forever, and I agree with that as well. And I just love Monolith, and I'd love to see Fear as well. As we approach the end of the podcast, it's time to drop the question prompt that, when answered correctly, will give you the chance to win one of 5 giveaway codes for System Shock. Ready? What company created Shodan in System Shock?
And that's going to do it for the very first episode of Deep Dive. We hope you stick with us as we delve even deeper into all sorts of topics in the future. Don't forget to comment for your chance to win a code for System Shock. And don't forget to hit the like button, ring the bell, subscribe. We're just getting started over here, and we do have a big announcement for the next episode. We promise we aren't doing this podcast just to kill time. Bye for now.